Hello, we're going to read Chapter 4 of Swiss Family Robinson. Back to the wreck. My wife and I awoke to the crowing of roosters. Without disturbing the children, I asked her advice. It is urgent that we return to the vessel. It is full of useful supplies and animals, which we may lose forever if there is another storm. At the same time, if we also need a better shelter and a better place to store our things, I can't decide what to do first. What do you suggest? We must have patience, she replied cheerfully. I think that the wreck should come first. Let's wake the children and get to work. Fritz, first up, ran out for his jackal. Finding it cold and stiff in the night's chill, he set it up on its legs in front of the tent and then stood by to watch the fun. The dogs were the first to detect their remarkably lifelike enemy and moved to dispose of it, but Fritz called them off. The noise brought the younger children out. A yellow dog, cried Franz. A wolf, exclaimed Jack. It's a striped fox, said Ernst. The learned professor apparently does not know a jackal when he sees one, said Fritz. Ernst looked closer. I really think it's a fox, he said. You must know better than your father, retorted Fritz, for he thinks it's a jackal. Enough arguing, I said. None of you are far wrong, for the jackal is related to the dog, wolf, and fox. The monkey had come out on Jack's shoulder, but hid in the tent at first sight of the jackal. Jack soothed and comforted the frightened little animal. We had our prayers, then a breakfast of biscuits and cheese. Ernst went down to the shore to look for shellfish, and soon returned with a few oysters. If only we had some butter, he said. Ernst, your constant ifs annoy me. If neither hunts, gathers, or fishes, so brings us no food. Now sit down and eat your biscuit, like the rest of us, I said. I would prefer it with butter, he said, pointing to a large barrel. Father, that is a keg of butter. I noticed some oozing out. Well done, Ernst, I said. I will open the keg. I cut a small hole, so as not to expose too much butter to the air, and then soon we were toasting our buttered biscuits. But something seemed strange. After a moment I realized it was the dogs, or rather the lack of dog activity. They lay very quiet, so I inspected. Each had several deep, painful wounds, especially about the neck. They were licking each other with where they could not reach with their own tongues. My wife dressed the wounds with butter. We must remember to look around the ship for spiked dog collars, said Fritz. That would give them an advantage. Yes, exclaimed Jack. If Mother would help me, I could make spiked collars. Then try, my son, I said. Now, Fritz, we must go to the wreck. I will help you, Jack, said my wife, but because I am curious to see what you plan. All of us must invent as many things as we can. There is no better use of our time. Well said, my wife, I added. Now, Jack, Ernst, Franz, listen to me. Stay together and obey your mother. Let's ask a blessing. After we prayed, I worked out a set of signals with my wife while Fritz steadied the boat. I set up a flagpole with a strip of sailcloth as a flag. So long as all was well ashore, it would fly. If we were needed, she was to lower the flag and have the boys fire 3 shots. If I wished news of shore, I would hoist a white flag of my own. When we had arranged a few other signals, I drew my dear wife in my arms. We may have to spend the night on the wreck, I told her. If you must, she said, I will feel better when you return. But we will manage. With some effort, we broke our embrace, and I prepared to embark. We took only guns and ammunition. Fritz, however, had brought his monkey, hoping to get it some milk. My 3 young sons and my brave wife waved us off to sea. Not far offshore, I felt a river current grab our boat. It was carrying us directly for the wreck, leaving us with little to do but remain in the current until we were nearly there. A bit of hard rowing soon had us through the gap in the hull. There we tied up and disembarked. Our first task was to care for the animals, who greeted us with joyful barnyard sounds. They were not starving, but we put out fresh food and water. Fritz placed his monkey by one of the female goats, and she let the little chap nurse in his chattering, grinning way. My son and I got some lunch, then sat down to plan. We should attach a mast and a sail to our boat, said Fritz. That current will not help us get back to shore. What makes you think of this now, when we have so much else to do?" I demanded grumpily. "I had a hard time rowing us through the opening," he answered. "Our boat will be very heavy when we embark. I'm not sure I'll be strong enough to row us to land, since the current will not help us. Perhaps we can make the wind take its place." "Good reasoning, my boy," I replied. "Even so, we mustn't overload the boat. Better to make more trips than risk capsizing or throwing valuable things overboard." I chose a small mast and set it up in a tub, using boards and ropes to brace it up. We found a spare sail and hoisted it to our new mast. "You were quite right, Fritz. Having done this first, we can do far more afterward." Fritz beamed. "Thank you, Father. We should have a banner for our mast. How about this red streamer?" He showed me a bit of red cloth. I thought it was childish but harmless, so I smiled and nodded. I got to work adding a rudder, which would make for easier steering than the oar I had been using. Fritz examined the shore with his telescope and announced that the flag was flying. It was now too late to return to shore that evening, so we signaled our intent to remain on board. We then started unloading the stones we had used to weigh the boat, replacing them with cargo to take ashore. The ship had sailed with all the supplies needed for a colony, so the difficult part was to choose wisely. Fritz was sure we could return for more, but I was not sure. First, we loaded a large amount of powder and shot, adding 3 excellent guns and an armload of swords, daggers, and knives. We loaded a large stock of kitchen utensils, plus some silver plates and a case of good wine from the captain's cabin. Next was the food supply. We grunted over heavy armloads of preserved meats, beef gelatin, hams, sausages, a bag of grain, and many other seeds and vegetables. I then added a barrel of sulfur for matches and as much string rope, and sailcloth as I could find. Fritz recommended we take some hammocks and blankets, and we filled the rest of our space with nails, tools, and farming implements. Our boat rode so low in the water that we were fortunate to have calm sea. As night drew on, a large fire ashore showed us that all was well. We replied by hoisting our 4 ship's lanterns, and 2 shots acknowledged our signal. If another storm struck in the night, I doubted that the ship could survive it, so we decided to sleep in our small boat. Praying God to keep our dear ones safe ashore, we retired. Fritz slept far better than I did. I could not stop worrying about my wife and children, alone with only 2 wounded dogs to protect them. This entire experience would force my young men to grow up faster than I had ever intended. If there was trouble in the night, I could only hope that Jack and Ernst would step up to the challenge. Perhaps leaving them alone ashore was the only way to teach them this, but I could not be easy about the risk. I greeted daybreak with joy and anxiety, and Fritz and I immediately went on deck. Through the telescope, I saw the flag still waving on shore. Better still, my wife came out of the tent and looked our direction. I hoisted a white flag, and the shore flag dipped 3 times. All was still well. What a weight that sight lifted from my heart. "Fritz," I said, "my next concern is for the animals on board. Let's try to take some of them with us." "Could we make a raft," he suggested, "and tow them ashore?" "How are we going to get a cow, a donkey, and a sow to board a raft, much less stand still on it? We might get the sheep and goats aboard, but I have no idea how to get the rest ashore." "We could tie a long rope around the sow's neck," Fritz proposed, "and just throw her in the water. We could tow her." "An excellent idea for the pig," I replied, "but I'm not sure about the others, even if I felt they could swim that far. In any case, the pig is the least important to keep." I had an idea, but I wanted Fritz to invent a solution, so I kept quiet. "Well," I said, "the only other thing I can think of is to make them swimming belts like the children's." "A good idea," I said. Fritz smiled, thinking I was kidding. "I'm serious," I added. "This may save them all. Let's begin with the sheep." I caught a fine ram, fastened a broad piece of cloth around its belly, and attached some large corks and empty cans. Fritz and I flung the bleeding animal into the sea, and it bobbed up to the surface. "Success!" "Hurrah!" exclaimed Fritz. "This will work." We got to work equipping the other animals. The cow and donkey were hardest. Cans and corks were not enough, so we lashed some empty barrels to them. When we had attached a rope to each and put a float on the loose end, the whole herd was ready for the voyage. We brought the donkey up first, protesting and lashing out at being led so near the edge of the deck. Once there, we both gave him a sudden heave overboard. He brayed furiously as he sank into the water. We were relieved when the frightened animal's head and back floated above the surface a moment later. The cow, sheep, and goats followed him, one after the other. We now had a barnyard in the sea, but it was not quite complete. The sow came last. She seemed determined not to leave. She kicked and squealed so fiercely that I thought we might have to leave her. Earlier, we had needed to muzzle her to keep from being bitten while we fitted her for sea. Now, as we wrestled her, we were glad we had left the muzzle on. It took all our strength and cleverness to shove her overboard. But once in the water, the energetic old lady outswam the rest to shore. Now we gathered up the ropes and set sail for shore with our herd in tow. Fritz had been right. Without the sail, we could not possibly have rowed such weight in all that distance. But thanks to the sail, we had leisure to eat a lunch of biscuits. Afterward, I took my telescope and tried to see what our dear ones on shore were doing. A sudden shout from Fritz got my attention. I turned to see him with his gun at his shoulder. The huge dorsal fin of a shark was headed for one of the finest sheep. The shark turned, exposing a stretch of white belly. Fritz's shot echoed across the still water. Our enemy disappeared, leaving a trace of blood in the calm water. "Fine shot, my boy," I cried. "I hope you don't always have to shoot such dangerous game." His eyes sparkled. He reloaded and kept watch, but the shark did not return. Soon the breeze carried us to the safety of shore, so I let loose the animals to make landfall on their own while I piloted us to a good landing place. There was no immediate sign of my wife or children, but a few moments later they came running with shouts of joy. After the first exchange of questions, we got to work removing the swimming belts, which were very awkward for the animals on shore. My wife marveled at them. "How clever you are," she said. "Fritz behaved with great credit," I replied. "The belts were his idea, and he saved at least one of our beasts from a terrible death." I then told them of his calm bravery against the shark. "Fritz, I'm tremendously proud of you," said my wife. "You are thinking and acting like a man, and I feel safer." I saw Fritz stand straighter. My wife's wisely chosen words had meant much to him. She continued, "Even so, I will now dread these trips even more if there are sharks in the water." Fritz, Ernst, and I began unloading while Jack tried to free the poor donkey from his cumbersome swimming belt. The animals would not stand quiet, and the knots were too tight, so Jack mounted up and rode the donkey toward us. "There is no time to fool us, Jack," I said. "You can practice riding later. Now get off and come help us." "I've been working all day," said Jack as he dismounted. "Look here." He pointed to a broad yellow belt around his waist with a couple of pistols and a knife sticking out. "And see what I've made for the dogs? Here, Juno, Turk." The dogs bounded up, and I saw that each wore a nail-studded leather collar, a bad surprise for any attacker. "Well done, my boy," I said. "But how did you make them? Did you have help?" "Except for sewing," my wife said. "He did it himself. As for the materials, Fritz's jackal supplied the skin, and the needles and threads came out of my wonderful bag. You men may have yet to learn how many useful things are in that bag. It is fortunate that you have a woman along." "For many reasons," I agreed with a warm smile. Fritz, however, was not impressed and held his nose. "Really, Jack," he said, "you should have cured the hide first. It smells disgusting. Don't come near me." "It's not the hide that smells," Jack said sharply. "It's that nasty jackal that my oldest brother himself left lying in the sun." "Stop arguing," I said. "Jack, help your brother drag the carcass to the sea. If your belt still smells, then take it off and dry it better." With the offending corpse gone, we finished unloading our boat and started for our tent. I saw no dinner preparation, so I said, "Fritz, go get us a ham." "Ernst," said my wife, smiling, "let us see if we can conjure up some eggs." Fritz got out a splendid ham and carried it to his mother in triumph, while Ernst set before me a dozen white balls of leathery covering. Turtle eggs, I said. Well done, Ernst. Where did you get them? We can talk about that while we eat, replied my wife. For now, let's see about getting dinner ready. While she set to work, we returned to the shore and brought up the rest of the cargo. The sow ran away, but we herded the rest of the animals toward the tent. Dinner was quite different from our first night's fare. My wife had improvised a table of a board laid on 2 casks. She had spread a white tablecloth with knives, forks, spoons, and plates for each person. We had a bowl of good soup, followed by a large omelet with ham slices, and then cheese, buttered biscuits, and a bottle of the captain's wine. While we feasted, I told my wife our adventures, then asked her about hers. There is not much to say about yesterday, she said. I spent most of it worrying and watching for signals. You can't imagine my joy. First thing this morning when I saw your signal, while my sons were still asleep, I tried to think of ways to improve our situation. We can't stay here, I thought. The sun is terribly hot, with no shade except the tent, and it's even hotter in there. Surely we can find a better place than this. By now the boys were up, with Jack busy skinning Fritz's jackal. He had an ingenious idea to line the collars with canvas so the nail heads would be covered. The hide was very moist and smelly. I gave him needles and threads to sew it. When I saw how hard and cheerful he worked, I felt sorry for him, finishing the sewing myself. Then he asked me to help him finish a belt of similar material. I did, but told him he had better figure out how to keep it from shrinking. Ernst had a good idea. Stretch the flattened skin on a board to dry it in the sun. Jack did so. I gathered my young men and said, "We must not waste this day. Shall we go exploring?" They all cheered. So I started packing food. Jack and Ernst carried guns while I took charge of the water flasks and the hatchet. My good dear husband, you were wise to teach our young sons to shoot at an early age. That training may save us one day. The dogs came, of course. Turk seemed proud to lead the way. We soon crossed the stream and reached the hill with the lovely view that you described. For the first time, I felt hopeful. I saw a little wood in the distance, and we headed that way along the beach. As we got close, we had to go through that tall, thick grass. While we were beating our way through, a great rushing noise startled us all. It was some large and powerful bird taking off. By the time either boy could aim, it had flown far away. "What a pity," exclaimed Ernst. "If the bird hadn't flown so fast, I would have gotten him." "No doubt," I said. "If your target would always give you time to get ready, you would be a fine hunter." "But I had no idea anything was going to fly up at our feet," he complained. "Game animals will not send you advance notice," I told him. "What was it?" asked Jack. "It was huge, maybe an eagle," answered little Franz. "Fine logic. It was big, so it was an eagle," Ernst said in scorn. "Let's see where he was sitting," I said. Jack sprang towards the spot, and a second larger bird took off with a great beating and flapping. The boys all stared upward. I laughed, saying, "Well, we will never go hungry with you great hunters on the job." In the grass we found a crude sort of nest, empty, with broken eggshells nearby. We could see the grass waving in the little bird's escape. "Come see, Franz," said Ernst. "Why, this could never have been an eagle. Eagles do not nest on the ground, nor can eaglets run just after they hatch. That is a trait of game birds like turkeys, pheasants, buzzards, and quail. You saw the white bellies, red underwings, and mustache-like feathers over the beaks, qualities of the great buzzard." "You are better with your eyes than your gun," I said. "In any case, I'm glad we didn't hurt the buzzard's family." We were getting close to the pretty wood. Many birds fluttered and sang high in the branches. But I asked the boys not to shoot any of them. It was a grove of the most marvelous, enormous trees, only a dozen or so, with huge roots well above the ground forming strong arches. I gave Jack some twine and told him to scramble up and measure one of the trunks. It was 18 yards around. "Then it is slightly less than 6 yards thick," said Ernst, "nearly 17 feet. "Your mathematical ability is impressive, my son," I said with a smile. Ernst went on to explain his calculations while we looked around for fruit. We found none, but the ground was well shaded and carpeted with soft greenery. We had a wonderful midday meal amid these glorious trees. If only we could build a home up in their branches. I decided that we had explored enough, but that we should search the beach for any debris from the wreck. Jack persuaded me to wait until we finished his belt and collars. If you can believe it, the child had been carrying the stretching board all this time. Finishing them was easy, and Jack put his belt on and strutted around while Ernst collared the dogs. We found the shore strewn with many things, probably useful, but too heavy for us to lift. We rolled some barrels above the high water line and dragged a couple of the chests higher on the ground. While we did this, the dogs were pouncing on the small tide pools, eating something. "They're eating crabs," said Jack. "No wonder they haven't seemed hungry." Sure enough, they were eating little green crabs, but those didn't satisfy them. Just as we were about to leave the beach, we saw Juno digging up and eating some round items. Ernst investigated. They were turtle eggs. "Then let's share in the booty," I cried. Juno had other ideas, and it wasn't easy to get her to share, but we gathered up a couple dozen eggs. While we did so, we saw a sail approaching the shore in the distance. We weren't sure what or who it was. We hastened back to the landing place. What a relief to see it was you. Now I hope you approve of our efforts, and that tomorrow you will be so kind as to pack everything up and take us away to live in that beautiful grove. "You want to live in a tree, my wife?" I asked, with a tolerant smile. "If we had wings or a balloon, that would work out nicely." "Laugh all you want," she answered, "but jackals wouldn't bother us at night in a tree. Neither would anything else. At home in Switzerland, I have seen tree houses quite sturdy, with staircases to reach them. Why couldn't we build one?" "I will consider it," I said, "and maybe we'll figure out a way. In the meantime, we've had a long day and a nice dinner. Let's have our prayers and go to bed." We had a long, satisfied sleep, but there was much to decide the next day.